Three-quarters of the cases of bird flu in people worldwide have occurred in Vietnam. Many of the victims have been brought to one hospital in the southern city of Ho Chi Minh. I went there to meet a British doctor who's lived and worked here for 10 years.
2nd of February.
Jeremy Farrer has witnessed the devastation caused by the H5N1 bird flu virus. We have no natural defences against it, and the body's immune reaction literally destroys the lungs.
Okay, so this is the chest X-ray of a normal patient. You can see the ribs here, and if you can see the black areas in between, this is where we breathe through. This is where we take in oxygen and breathe out carbon dioxide, and we need this, of course, to live.
And then what happens in the patient with H5N1 virus?
So this is now a patient who was admitted in January with H5N1, and you can see that on admission to this hospital, already you can see the vast difference. The black areas of the right lung have now been completely destroyed by the virus, and so there's very little gas exchange, very little oxygen exchange going on in this lung.
This bit, the dark bit over here?
And you can see its patient still had a little bit of lung that was working okay, and in fact this patient came into hospital breathing on their own without any assistance from us. But you can see about 2 days later, you can see there's a horrendous progression of the disease. So by now, the whole of the lung tissue is destroyed. So both the right lung and the left lung now are completely damaged by the virus.
So essentially this patient was now, the lungs have been destroyed.
So there is essentially no lung there, and the patient now is no longer able to breathe for themselves.
And what happened to that patient?
And this patient died about a day after this X-ray was taken.
All serious influenza viruses originate in birds. In Vietnam, the poultry population has exploded in recent years, a cheap source of protein in this fast-developing nation. People live cheek by jowl with their poultry. Cockfighting is just one way in which humans and their birds are brought into close contact. The greatest danger is when butchering birds infected with the flu virus. People can breathe in droplets of blood, saliva or feces. It's thought eating infected poultry that's not properly cooked can be a way of catching the disease. Ducks, in particular, are reservoirs. They often carry it without showing any signs of ill health. This new virulent strain of bird flu has become endemic in flocks in Vietnam.
Can we see this patient? Al, can we see this patient?
Winter is approaching and the flu season is about to start. At present, Dr. Farrer and the medical staff are caring for patients with malaria and dengue fever, but they expect to soon see a new wave of bird flu cases.
I think we have to assume it's going to happen, and in Hanoi and in Ho Chi Minh City, the various authorities and we in the clinical and research community are assuming it's going to happen and are trying to prepare for that.
This lethal flu strain first jumped from bird to human in Hong Kong 8 years ago. It died down but then re-emerged in China. There have been 122 confirmed cases in Vietnam, Cambodia, Thailand and Indonesia in the past 3 years. They raise the spectre of 1918. The last great pandemic sparked by a virulent bird flu infected half the world's population during the First World War. It killed up to 50 million people in 3 distinct global waves of disease. Flu pandemics are a natural phenomenon. There have been 2 lesser outbreaks last century. Professor John Oxford has researched the origins of the virus that caused the 1918 pandemic. He's exhumed bodies preserved in the permafrost of Norway to take samples of lung tissue to isolate the bird flu strain that began in an army camp in northern France.
We think it broke out in that camp, and it started slowly. That's why we have to be so careful now. You know, in the first month there were 50 cases. It had in the near vicinity geese, swans, ducks, chickens.
So those are soldiers what, buying geese to eat?
In the live goose market, chicken market in the nearby village.
And of course, geese have been carriers of
Yes.
this avian flu virus.
Yes.
Like the bird flu today, the 1918 strain took its heaviest toll on young, healthy adults, not the elderly who had better immunity.
These samples were taken as a piece of lung from a victim from the 1918 pandemic. So we can come along all these years later. My colleagues in the United States have reconstructed the virus totally from those genes.
And when you look at the genetic footprint of the 1918 virus in that,
Yes.
and you look at the virus today that we're so concerned about, do
Yes.
you see similarities?
Unfortunately, you do see similarities. I say unfortunately because it's again another warning. This H5N1 has a little too likeness, to my way of thinking, to the 1918 virus.
So far, the H5N1 bird flu virus has only infected a person on 122 documented occasions. It hasn't spread beyond those people. Global pandemics occur when a flu virus finds a way to transmit easily from person to person. To do that, the H5N1 virus either needs to change gradually as happened in 1918, or to mix with a seasonal human flu virus inside a person. Either route could create a highly contagious and deadly strain.
It has been around for 5 or 6 years. We've had 60 deaths. Probably 1 billion people have been exposed to it. So at the moment, it's not showing any signs of mutating into a human strain or mixing with a human flu virus. But it could happen in the short term, or it might be quite a long time before it happened. Or even a third scenario, it could be an entirely different bird flu strain that we don't yet know about. So all of those scenarios are possible.
An epidemiologist at Oxford University, Professor Angela McLean, has studied the pattern of infectious diseases and their effect on society. The longer between flu pandemics, the less immunity there is in the population. Professor McLean plans to send her children to the country to try and protect them from the first wave of infection if a pandemic breaks out.
The first wave of the epidemic is the bad one, and we'd expect it to be quite short. We'd expect it to last about 3 months, and then things to go quiet again, for reasons that aren't entirely clear, and then for there to be other waves later. The pandemic could last for several years in different waves, but hopefully as you get further into the pandemic, control will be much, much better. So yeah, I'm prepared to take 3 months out of my kids' education in order to protect them.
But isn't this all scaremongering? People are very afraid of this, and it might not happen. It's been about to happen for some time with the warnings, but it might not happen at all.
I think it will happen. The question is when. It might not happen soon, that's right. But the trouble is, if it does happen, it could be so bad. I hate scaremongering, I really do. But the fact is that very often with emerging infections, we've been in denial, actually. And then things have turned out really bad.
Vietnam, with 80 million people and a huge reservoir of H5N1 in poultry, is at risk of a serious outbreak. Each new case of bird flu in a person gives the virus a new opportunity to change into something able to pass easily from person to person, the precondition for a pandemic. And what's been happening in this population in recent months raises the disturbing possibility that the virus is mutating. We visited Hanoi's Infectious Diseases Hospital, where doctors saw 33 bird flu patients last year from across northern Vietnam.
This area for isolation patients.
So far, the medical staff haven't considered there's a high risk to them from nursing such patients. But now they worry there are signs the virus is evolving.
The virus which causes this illness can change its form and its strain. Sometimes it makes the disease worse, sometimes less severe. We already sent our samples to some other countries to test, and the results show that the virus had changed at the end of last season's epidemic.
In the past year, nearly 3 times as many Vietnamese have caught the bird flu virus as in the previous year, but more are surviving. But to the British doctor who has watched it spread here in the past 2 years, that is hardly reassuring.
In this virus, so far, 50 or 60% of people who get the infection die. And of course that virus dies with that patient. And it's absolutely tragic for the patient and their family. But in terms of spreading the virus to other people, it's actually very good news at a population level, because that virus can't go on. The worry would be if the virus started killing slightly fewer people, but infected more, then we have what we had in 1918, and then we have the chance for a global pandemic.